At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES. Only on Super NES. You're listening to the SNES Podcast with your host, Soulblazer.
Hello everybody, this is Super NES Podcast, episode number 265. These are your hosts as always, Greg and Joe.
Hello.
We're covering a game, a game this time that I picked because I have nostalgia for this. That is kind of one game, not kind of one game, like we'll get to in a moment. We are covering the Super Famicom port of the Famicom versions of the classic Wizardry games 1, 2, and 3, which came out with Super Famicom under the the title of The Story of Illyricum. In Japan only, as it was me saying Super Famicom, like it's implying here. In 1990, 1992 for Japan. So, anyway, I just mentioned I have experience with the franchise already. Joe, this is probably a franchise so I had to guess, it's a franchise you've heard of but hadn't actually played before now?
So, this is a franchise that I've heard of, would not have played before. Just happened to be the remake that recently came out for multiple platforms. Yeah, so that was my first experience with the game. I played a little bit of that, and then obviously playing this game. So it's very, very limited, and there's a reason for that, which we'll get into as we talk about the games.
Right. Well, because well, I can probably tell you. I can probably guess that main reason. That main reason right now. This franchise is a very old franchise. It originally came out in the 80s, and like the other great computer RPG franchises of the time period, like Ultima, like Might and Magic, it is very, very hard. And that was it. And the games were designed to be hard on purpose because. They expected you to grind away on this for like 200 hours or however long that might take you to be able to beat the game, get your money's worth out of it. So, the Wizardry series has a reputation of being one of the most difficult CRPGs out there, actually. So, I was first exposed to this series. Actually, my first experience with this was via the NES. There were several franchises for franchises where I got my first exposure to. With the NES, and I mentioned before that these were actually ports of ports. So the original game came out in 1981. Proving Grounds of the Mad Overlord is the actual full title of the game. 1981 for the Apple II, got ported to other computers and systems. The sequel came out the following year, The Knight of Diamonds, and then the year after that, the third game, Legacy of Illyricum, which were all like computer games. All three games did eventually get ported over to the Famicom with updated graphics and music and some other quality life improvements. In much the same way that the Dragon Quest games, 1, 2, and 3, got ported over to the Super Famicom later on in their life. With those same enhancements. They did the same thing with the Wizardry games as well, like onto the NES. So, if you're familiar with that, like familiar with the Dragon Quest games, think the same process here, because that's here with these games, because that's basically like what happened. So,
and I'm just going to interject here, because this is going to be something that I'm going to bring up later on. So with the Dragon Quest games, I get it. Dragon Quest games getting ported over to the Super Famicom. Totally makes sense. It was early on in the SNES library, existence and whatnot. But like you quoted 1992, this game was released for the Famicom on June 1st of 1999. We're talking 16-bit era. Well, not even 16, 32. Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, Super Nintendo. PlayStation are like out, and like even 99, that's the N64 is out.
Yeah,
like, this release kind of, and again, and that's part of my my review of this game. Like, this release really puzzled me, and I understand the history over in Japan. Like, this game, at least the Apple II version, inspired pretty much almost every JRPG that came along, including Dragon Quest. So, like, I get it, but also, like, wow, like, why did you wait till 1999 to do that?
I'm glad you brought that up because I had some theories about that.
I was going to say, and the other thing I'll mention is that 1999 is an interesting date because of the fact that they did a port of this game and an upgrade for the Saturn and PlayStation in 1998. So I hope you found something in your research, but like, who was this for?
So I found a little bit. So thank you for bringing that up. I was going to get there eventually, but I was fine to talk about this now because the 1992 date I mentioned was the actual NES, some of the NES ports.
Okay.
To the series because essentially there was a bigger jump from the computer to the Famicom version than there was the Famicom than there was like Famicom Super Famicom version, as you might expect.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure if you look at pictures or gameplay, the original pictures like the original 1980s releases, Joe, but they're rough.
Yeah.
Even by early 80s standards, they're rough because they're very. Given the time period, it's understandable because the games did come out of the Apple II originally. The Apple II was not a graphical powerhouse of a computer. We covered Prince of Persia last episode, which also came out of the Apple II originally. So, I'm sorry, Macintosh, but same family. They're not known for being the graphical powerhouse of the power system. So, the computer versions of the game were many versions monochrome color, if any color at all. Some of the versions were black and white.
Yep.
Very simple graphics, a lot of text, kind of clunky gameplay, 5 1/4-inch discs that required like very slow load and save times. You had to make a save disc that contained your characters, and something ever happened to that save disc, you were FOL. Like SOL. They were very important games, and they sold very well. And those three games, those three games also formed a trilogy, like the first 3 Dragon Quest games did as well too. But definitely, it's like the games were definitely like an upgrade. So it makes perfect sense to me why the Famicom got about 10 years later got an upgraded version of the game. So as Joe mentioned, a lot of big franchises were directly or at least indirectly inspired by this franchise because like Ultima, it was very popular in Japan. Like Ultima, these were originally Western-made video games that found their way over to Japan, in some cases Europe. Where developers have said over the years that this franchise had an influence on such famous franchises today as the Shin Megami Tensei series, Dragon Slayer, the Shining series, Fire Emblem Fantasy, and of course, as Joe mentioned, Dragon Quest. So. The importance of these games cannot be overstated. I realize that like Ultima, like Might and Magic, anybody looking at these games now, now is gonna be like, what's the big deal? Because they're very simple. They're very simple and dated. But they were very important games, and like I said, they were tough. They were a challenge. People, computers tended to be the playground of adult gamers for a long time. You're a kid. Consoles were consoles like where you were quote unquote intended to be at. Whether or not that was correct or not is a whole different argument. But for a very long time, consoles were seen as kid toys, and computers were like the adults that they're gaming at. So the games were designed to be hard on purpose, and they certainly did not falter in that regard. So in the series, did not get any easier. Easier to come with later releases for sure either. So, But anyway, so those three games sold very well. Like I said before, I totally understand why they were updated to about 10 years later, like the Famicom. The first two Famicom updates, 1 and 2, did come out here in North America. The third one never did. But like this game, you also can find a translation patch online to play that version of the game, that English if you want to. And Proving Grounds, the Man Overlord was a very popular game. Still is a very popular game. That's why they targeted it for the recent remake. That game also sold pretty well, like the NES. Like when that version of it was brought over to North America. So like I said, a lot of people have an affection for that series. They have affection like this game, which is why the recent remake they picked this game to do it with.
Yeah.
So the games are franchised. So the games are brainchild of a small company at the time called Surtech Software, which had been founded recently before the games came out in 1987. They were around to 2003. Besides the Wizardry franchise, Surtech's also best known for the Jagged Alliance franchise, which is a tactical slash RPG action franchise, which also has been revived in recent years. There was a new Jagged Alliance game that came out not that long ago. So. But it appears that Digital Eclipse got the rights to the Wizardry franchise because they're the ones who developed and published the recent Wizardry 1 upgrade that Joe and I were talking about before. Yeah. Which by the way, I'll just throw in like right here. That's a very good remake of the game. If you have any interest, if you have any interest in all checking out the franchise, that's a great place to start. It's still a very hard game, but it's not quite as bones crushing difficult as the original PC version was all those years ago.
Yeah.
So anyway, so like I said, my first experience with the franchise was on the NES, where I played 1 and 2. So and then like I said, in later years, I bought later games. There wasn't anything for a while. The franchise did eventually get 5 more games. Wizardry 4, the return of Wendia for 1987 was a very interesting game in that you actually played as Wendia, the villain you defeated in the first game. So you got to go through things from his perspective instead of as you tried to escape from the dungeon, which is a very interesting, unique idea of the time period. Then there was a sequel to the original games. Heart of the Maelstroms came out the following year. Then in 1990, there was a 6th game, Bane the Cosmic Forge. 1992 had the 7th game, Crusaders the Dark Servant. And then finally, the last game, just called 8, came out in 2001. And in between them, you also had a spin-off adventure game called Nemesis: The Wizardry Adventure. So we probably would come back to the franchise again at some point, because 5 came out for the Super NES in both Japan and North America, and 6 came out in Japan only. So I've not checked to see if 6 has a translation for English yet. It probably does. Given how diehard these fans are, I would not be surprised. But at the very least, we will be covering Heart of the Maelstrom at some point. Because that also got North America. These Capcom of all companies actually published the game in North America. That's how popular that's how popular the franchise still was at that time period. So, but as I mentioned before, 2001 was the last time we saw a new game in the franchise. It's probably dead, but then again, I say that, and the recent remake of the first game came out recently out of left field. Nobody expected that. So I would not never say never as far as getting a new game in this franchise. But so now I've gone over the history of this game, the history of in this franchise. I should say like in really broad strokes. We'll come out to the Super Famicom upgrade. I don't know exactly why this came out so late Super Famicom's lifetime. My guess is that, as you mentioned, Joe, since the version also got ported over the PlayStation and Saturn in Japan is that they saw the ability to be able to cash in a popular franchise for cheap and just ported the game. A lot of the hard work was already done because the games had already been upgraded to the 8-bit systems. So it probably was a very cheap and simple effort just to port the games. Pat them up a bit more and put them onto like more advanced systems. And some in Japan, which of course Japan is very RPG crazy. So
right.
Because you noticed they never came out here in the West. They were like Japan only releases. So
to be honest, that was the response I was expecting, where you were just going to be like, Japanese RPG crazy, so of course they're gonna love the origins of RPGs with this, and that would have been a satisfactory answer. The whole time, like, I'm sitting here, like when I was playing the game and, doing, some light research on the side, I was just like baffled when I saw that date, because I was thinking like, 94 or 95, maybe. Like, that would make sense. Like, this is going to be easier to get than the computer game, you know what I mean? So that would make sense. But then when I saw, like, 99, I was just like, okay, like, there's got to be some reasoning, and I'm probably right. It's probably they love their RPGs, and
also, like I said, I also suspect the fact was that the product, it was, I'm also sure the fact the product could be done for cheap was also like a pretty easy money, correct? Yeah, right, exactly. So, the game also came out in Windows too, by the way. I think so again, I think that version was Japan only, but it wasn't just for consoles.
Yeah.
So anyway, they could have did this, so as mentioned, they stitched together the first 3 games on this cart. Obviously, the games are somewhat small. Especially by '99, there was like cart sizes that were easily able to handle all 3 games. You pick the game after a very nice title screen. Then you get to pick which game you want to play. And then at least on the English version we played, because there's a ROM, because the ROM was translated. This is testimony to the fact how late that this game came out, Joe. Because the fact that you may have noticed this, the game came out in Japan June 1st, 1999. By that point, there already was a ROM hacking scene here in the West, especially in the States, for like older games. It only took them a year to get an English patch for this game available. Yeah. I mean, that's 2000 translation. That's like blows my mind. Yeah. So we used that translation version. I also used an additional addendum hack that came out several years later that cleaned up some of the they fixed some bugs that the original translation patch had, and makes the English more solidly smooth and not so much English like the first translation was. So Joe did not play that version. I forgot to remind him about that. That's my fault. But at least 2 of us can compare our differences that we saw visit the translations like this game.
Yeah, and any complaints I had about the game, it most certainly wasn't about the English, because I was like, it's a translation. I expect the English to be there and not be great.
Whereas actually like they didn't patch, like it's excellent. Like it's perfect English. So anyway, they could have just simply have just stuck the Famicom games onto the games on this collection and called it a day. They did get some upgrades. The games did not get the same upgrades that the original computer to Famicom versions got, but still got some upgrades. The graphics got updated again to 16-bit quality. The music also got updated like a little bit. They sound like 16-bit. The control schemes kept pretty much the same, but I think the smoothing with the moving around the dungeons was made more smoother, like a more looked better than it did in the Famicom versions because of the more powerful system, I'm sure. So the text is a bit larger to read compared to the Famicom version, I think. And there's some other. The control is basically the same. They're still using the same control scheme that the original Famicom version used. So so it's a nice upgrade. It's like Is it enough an upgrade to play this over the Famicom version if you already had the Famicom variant version? Probably not. But, if you're starting out with this, this is probably the best version of the original games you're going to find out there. So, if you decide you want to check out these 3 games, for like whatever reason. And, I'll get back to it later on, but, spoiler, I think these games still hold up pretty well as long as you're as long as the mindset of the person who enjoys a challenge like this, because like I said, the computer versions, the console versions are not quite as brutal as the computer versions, but they are still very, very tough. Yeah. So another change that another change that the translation gave you was there was an option screen. The option screen added a translation patch that allowed you to do things like decide if you wanted the text, the enemy, the items, or spells to be English or Japanese, and you can mix and match those as you want to. You could also change how the dungeons look. I just talked about that. You either could pick line drawings like the original Famicom version had, or surface drawings, which means the more smoothed out, better looking dungeon look that the 16-bit versions of these 3 games has. So you can also turn the hide command on or off. You can have the avatar be a picture or text. The original version, the PC version of the game, just had text. Sound could be in mono stereo, and you can also listen to all the music and sound effects here. It's a very nice option screen that the translation people added. Actually, let me take that back. This screen was present with the original version of the game. The translation people simply made this a bit easier to navigate in this when they translate over the game over. So anyway, so with all that background and setup and everything I actually talked about here, we can actually go into the gameplay itself. So. Joe, I know you probably don't have a lot of experiences with games of this type, so I'm curious to see how your experience, how your first dipping toe in the water with this went.
So, like I said, I played the remake for a bit, so I kind of knew what I was getting myself into. So, I love the games that this game inspired. I've confessed my love for the Dragon Quest series here, and the first, 3 I think it's the first 5 Dragon Quest games. You really see, especially in the battle system, that they took that from Wizardry, where you can see the enemy come up and then you choose your battle action. I had to put myself into the mindset of, yes, I'm reviewing an SNES game, but realistically, I am reviewing an mid-80s PC game that's been upgraded. Yeah.
Like, 81, 83 for all 3 of these games originally.
Yeah, so, I did give it some leeway. That being said, there is a lot that you can do here that I did not expect to have access to.
It's one of the reasons this game's so popular, because it's it was very ahead of its time.
Yeah, so, kind of catch people up. It's a first-person point of view dungeon crawl, and you walk. You can sometimes spring traps. You'll encounter enemies, fight your way through, and then in certain parts of the game, you have to get certain items to be able to progress further into the dungeon, and eventually, fight, Wordna. Anyways, it's set up in 2 different areas. You have a castle where you can access the tavern, which is where you're going to be able to create and modify your party members.
Which takes a long time. I spent 40 minutes.
Oh my god!
Party creation.
It is such it's such a long time. You could do so much, but also
they give you a party of 6, which is huge. The time period.
Yeah, so you could do a party of 6. Yeah. You can have characters that are aligned with either being good, neutral, or evil, And they can't be swapped. Like, you can't have evil with good or neutral. Or I should say, you can't have evil with good, and you can't have good with evil, but neutral slot in with either one.
There are tricks you can do with console versions to get around that, but we won't get into that right now. But.
Also, you can inspect your party's members after you already have them and you've gone on an adventure. You can divvy up gold there, which essentially is just, you have 6 players in your party. You have 100 gold. Well, here's, 21 something, amongst them. So it's real simple, but it's kind of nice. Then you have the adventures in, and like many RPGs, Inn is exactly what it sounds like. It is a place where you can rest your head. So you're going to be healed. There were a few options here. So you have a cot. Then you have economy rooms, merchant suites, and royal suites. In addition to a good night's rest and recovery, it does... How do I put this? Time passes while you're resting. It's not like other RPGs where you just rest and, you save the game and that's it. Here, you're going to age while you're resting. One of the really good strategies that I would give to people is use your clergy to heal everybody outside of the inn. And then just use the inn to have the clergy rest. Because the clergy will age, but because of the magic, he won't age as much. And he's going to be your healer. So, eventually he'll die. Natural causes, whatever. But,
Also, in my experience playing these games, it's not worth paying money for a room. It's like,
correct.
Like the stables are fine to sleep in. So, don't waste your money on that because there's far more important things to spend your money on, like weapon armor that you desperately need to survive.
Yes. And then the other thing is obviously, when you're at your inn, you'll gain your levels through the experience that you've acquired through your time in the dungeon. And if you don't have enough experience points to level up, you usually get a screen a la, Dragon Quest. That'll tell you how much experience you need to hit that next level. The other spot is you have Voltek's trading post, which, he not only sells goods, he will also buy your goods. He identifies things, and he will uncurse your items. So, Voltek is a man to trust for sure. Then there's the Temple of Cant. Regardless of your affliction, you can bring your party members here, and for a small donation, the temple usually can fix whatever ails your character. The 3 statuses was paralysis, dead, and ashed. And obviously, the severity of those and your character level will influence how much needs to be paid to be able to do that. This is another thing that as you progress through the game, just kind of goes away. Like, you don't need it. Eventually, your characters will learn, hopefully one of your magic characters will learn an ability to be able to revive and, cure the ailments of your party members. So you don't have to worry about that. And then you have the edge of town, and the edge of town is what it sounds like. This is where you're going to go for like your training grounds, recover a lost party, and be able to, adventure out into your dungeons.
This game, it's probably immediately obvious this game also took a lot of inspiration from D&D as well when it came out. So it basically, in many ways, I'd argue this game is the purest form of D&D in game form for the 80s. Yeah. Because while the game series took inspiration from D&D, Ultima Might and Magic also, and many other games obviously took inspiration from D&D. I see the most influence of the first editions of Dungeons and Dragons right here with these games.
Yeah,
it's like if there was an official D&D game, this would be this would probably be it, because it's very because I feel it's very D&D and like inspired for sure.
Yeah, and it's like a snake eating onto itself. So, D&D was generally inspired by Tolkien's work and whatever else. So, the whole snake eating thing comes full circle here, because here we are with a game that's very D&D like, and inspired, and one of the races that you can choose is Hobbit. So it also acknowledges that, it started because of Tolkien's, writings, which is fantastic.
Right.
On top of Hobbit, you have human, elf, dwarf, and gnome.
Right.
There are different.
And then
there are perks to each race. And those races, those perks are going to lean towards a certain class. And boy, could I sit here and break that down, but you don't want to hear that. But I will say that, the classes that you have is your cleric, who's going to be your healer. You have a fighter, which is obviously a hack and slash. You have a lord, which is a combo of like the fighter and cleric. You have the mage user, who is obviously your magic user. I meant mage means magic user. Jeez. You have ninja, which is an assassin that has a chance to do one-hit kills, which is pretty cool. You have a samurai class, which is a combination of the fighter and mage. Thief, I don't think I need to explain, but I'll let you know that he's perfect for traps and chests. And then, obviously, you have your wizard, who is a combination of the cleric and mage, and probably one of the best characters that you can have in a party. Just make sure that you buff him a lot.
Yes,
because
to add some additional context. Yep, for sure. To add some additional context to that, certain of those professions are only available with certain stat rolls. So if you want some of the classes, you have to roll the dice for a long time. It feels like see if you can get lucky enough to get one of those. It is possible to promote characters later on in the game as well too. So once that character becomes strong enough, and it is also possible to change the. It's also possible to change the allegiance of a party member as well, because like your party members can be good or evil, they're also going to be good or evil monsters as well. So you got to be careful about that because if you're always having your good people attack and kill evil monsters, there's a chance that your party members become evil instead as well. Conversely, the opposite's true. So you can slowly change somebody's affiliation if you want to. It takes a while, but it is possible to be able to do that. It's also possible to. I know one game as a kid, I said somebody changed, and I'm like, why did that happen? I didn't understand why. So, because it's unusual for a game to have a good. It's unusual for a game to have a good evil monsters. I mean, outside of the Shin Megami Tensei and Persona series, I really can't think of too many games that do that. So, so it's a concept that, again, I said before, in many ways, this game's ahead of its time, and I realize that it looks very crude and rough by today's standards, but there's a reason these games were so popular back then because they were very revolutionary in many ways, including with that aspect. Yeah. Not all these aspects carried over to modern gaming. Obviously, that whole good evil thing is kind of either fallen by the wayside or been modified to make it easier with modern game progression and whatnot. Yeah. But it was a very unique idea of the time period. So anyway, I didn't mean to interject you for that long there.
No, you're good.
Anything else you want to say?
I mean, combat's done through a menu system, much like you would expect. Again, I'm going to reference Dragon Quest because it is the easiest. The original Dragon Quest / Dragon Warrior. I I mean, it looks almost identical to what you get here with this game, except for obviously the dungeon crawling sections.
Right.
So everything's done through a menu. You have to literally open up a menu to be able to check areas that you're in, whether that's for treasure or whatever else. So again, very much in the D&D namesake, where you're constantly rolling those dice to see if there are traps or whatever in that area. I believe it's every encounter is when the game saves, or something along those lines, or at least when you're in the tavern, if you go back to the main menu, like from the tavern, it'll automatically save. There's definitely some things I saw online which I did not try, but you can basically game the system by rolling stats, and if you don't like them, you can basically back out, go back in, and basically.
Yep, that's what I mentioned before. Yeah. Also, yes, and conversely, there's also a trick you can do, which carries over which carries over like the Famicom version, where you can like create a party member, strip out their gold, delete them, keep the gold, make somebody else again, and rinse and repeat, and get a lot of money at the start of the game.
Okay.
So
yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, so the updated saving is a feature the console versions have because the computer versions did not have that.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
While saving is still not as often as often as you might like, there is more regular saving in this version of the game than previously. So
yeah, and that's going to bring me to one of the other things I absolutely love about this game. So I don't know how it would have worked with the PC games, or I mean, it probably wouldn't work with the Famicom games, but here with the Super Famicom games, all three being on this cartridge, you can carry your party over through all three games.
That was done. That was done in the original games too.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, Wizardry 2, you were required originally to have a party from the first game. It wasn't there was no later release of the game that they actually, a later Apple II release, later on in the year that they actually added the ability to let you pre-generate a party to start the game with, as opposed to having an import one. But yes, like the Ultima games as well, you had the ability to be able to. I'm sorry, not Ultima. Might and Magic, I think, also allowed you to import party members over. So,
okay.
But yeah, that was also like a pretty advanced feature of the time period.
Yeah. So I mean, I've discussed my RPG history here quite a few times. So, like, this is all way before my time. Before I even got into RPGs, as I've said, Final Fantasy was my first real experience, but like first real experience wasn't until Lunar on the PlayStation. So, I got in late. So a lot of this stuff, like, to me is passe and like very like, why are we doing this through text box sort of thing? But like I said, when I was playing through this game, I was keeping that mindset that this was, I said mid 80s. But that was kind of where I was like, okay, this is the original RPG. If I was making a D&D game visually, this would be how I'd be doing it. And, when I did it that way, I adapted pretty quickly to it. I love that this is the bones of what everything is now today. And it's fun to go back and see this history. But I will say, and you probably knew this was coming, this is not my cup of tea.
I mean, I understand why, because like I said, this game, like I have affection for this, affection for like these games because I grew up with them basically.
Right.
So,
right.
But I totally understand. They're hard to get into these days. It's like that's why I think the recent remake on Steam and consoles is so good because it's so user friendly.
Yeah. It's
still a challenging game, but it's still Wizardry while making Wizardry more accessible. Yeah. To modern gamers.
Yep.
So, and also that game looks and sounds great as well too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I was gonna say when we get to that, we'll talk about that. But yeah, I 100% agree. Here, the graphics and sound is fantastic. Spoiler.
Yeah, well, that's fine. You brought it up. It's like we're talking about it here because like I said, these graphics and sounds are pretty much just upgraded versions from the already upgraded Famicom version. So, but yeah, so the graphics and music are good. They're not revolutionary. They're still the dungeons often look like very bland, but well, what they are though, the graphics of this game I think are quite good. The cars are sharp. There's good detail. The music's nice. The sound effects are very effective. So it certainly helps. So
yeah, I thought the visuals looked good. Obviously finding out that this game was released in 99, I was a little disappointed, but considering they're taking the 8-bit games and just kind of throwing a 16-bit window dressing on it, it services its part. I thought the enemies looked all right. I think the walls look okay. The doors look like doors. You know what I mean? So, it's definitely a step up from what the original presentation was. And I think it services it very well. That being said, sound effects and music, I thought were incredible for this game.
They are, yeah.
Sound is on point. Especially the minute you boot up the cart, or in this case, the ROM, and that title scene pops up and that music starts. I was like, wow, this is a Super Nintendo game? Again, then finding out that, 1999 makes sense. But it really does feel like an orchestra's coming out of the cartridge. You know what I mean? It's really good. I was really surprised.
Yeah, definitely. No, yeah, so let me clarify that. I don't mean these graphics are terrible. I just mean by Super NES standards, they're very simple.
Right.
As far as the game itself goes, they're good.
Yeah.
Because and 2 and 3 being later games have a little bit better graphics than the first one did because the original games had better graphics.
Right.
Joe just mentioned the fact that these games aren't really his cup of tea. There's definitely things that modern gamers are spoiled to that these games do not have, that harken back again to many memories from me playing games back in the 80s as a kid. Obviously because this game's so old, there's no auto map.
Right.
You actually have to have paper, preferably graph paper, which I used as a kid back in the day, to map out each dungeon. And believe me, you need to map out each level because there are traps aplenty to hit you as you're exploring the place. The worst of them is the teleport spells.
Yes.
That randomly just toss you somewhere else, and you have no idea that you got teleported. So, making a good map there, a good map of this place is critical. This dungeon is not huge; it's only 10 levels, but and it's only 20 by 20. So by modern standards, it's still a very small place. But the enemies. But because they're they're high difficulty, and because the enemies get tougher and tougher each level, you do need to grind quite a while on a level before you feel safe enough to proceed downwards. So, and like Joe mentioned, at least this game features better saving than the first game did, because the original PC version, you had to return to town to save. If you died in the party wipe. A new party later on can find your bodies and get your gear back, but that's the best you can do.
Yeah.
So, there's a reason the franchise was known for its brutal difficulty. So we really haven't mentioned story very much, to be honest. There's not much of story like these three games because they are so old. I did mention that these three games do kind of form a loose trilogy, which the name is. As the name of the Super NES version, the story of Logrim implies, Logrim is the name of the town / city-state that you're actually venturing in these three games. So, but they do tie together in a loose way. Just to go over the story beats real quick here. Proving Ground to the Meta Overlord is pretty much what it sounds like. You are hired by the rulers of the town to go down to this dungeon and defeat this and defeat this mad overlord. You find out later on, is named, like it's named Wordia because you actually play him in the fourth game. So the sequel Knights of Diamonds has basically having been that there's been a civil war and the rulers have been killed, and so the city's only hope for recovery. Like if you get the staff of Nilda, which you can only get from trading the mysterious and magical Knight of Diamonds armor from legendary Knight of the same name to fend off the invaders. So that's where the name Knight of Diamonds comes from, like the second game, like in the series. And the third game, Legacy of Ligrum, the city's being attacked by nature, basically earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, etc. And you need to seek out a dragon and find out what's going on here to be able to save the city.
Yep.
So the story of these games is pretty much told in the manual. There's not much, if at all, in the game itself, which again is typical for games this time period.
Yep.
So because many games, as I'm sure Joe probably remembers, had very elaborate backstories and manuals that went on for pages. Yep. But there's nothing. But the game itself made like not one bit of mention about it at all. So again, these games, to really understand what's going on, you really need to look at the instructions, or the manual to figure things out. But basically, it's not critical to figure out, because it's basically all three games is like you're dungeon crawling through a dungeon to try to defeat some big bad evil force at the end.
Yep.
So. The later games, when we get to the Super NES entries later on, those have more detailed stories. But again, for games this time period, gameplay was first, and story was pretty much like an afterthought.
Yep.
And they pretty much kept that, and they pretty much kept that alone. And they pretty much kept that alone with the NES and Super NES for upgrades like these games. So. Did you poke your nose into 2 or 3 at all, Joe, to see how they differ?
So I did poke my nose into the second one for a bit. I did notice there was a bit of a graphical difference, but it's essentially the same game, and I felt 3 was going to be the same way, and I had at least made a effort to complete the first game so that we could talk about it. So it was like, I'll at least poke my head into the second one and see how that is, and then, kind of make my assumptions for the third one. But
there's not too much different with the third game.
Yeah.
The two big differences was that instead of going down a dungeon this time, you're actually going up instead.
Oh, okay.
So and also where it's assumed the first 2 games you're playing like the same characters.
Yeah.
In the third game, because he's actually set like years later, you're actually playing Descendants, like the original party, instead. So you keep the same name in class,
right?
But you can't pick a new alignment this time. So and everything's reset to level 1 for you because you are newbie, basically. Right. So that was a different twist of the time period. So anyway, we've already pretty much shared our final thoughts on this as they were talking about it. Joe bounced off of it, which I'm not surprised. I do appreciate the fact that, I do appreciate the fact that Joe recognized what this franchise was and how important it was to things to come, and he gave it a shot at least. So
yeah, and it's definitely given me enough to where I think I'll probably go back to the remaster at some point and play through that.
Very good,
so there is that, because when I first started playing the remaster, I was kind of like, all right, like I get that they're going for how the original game was, and they cleaned up the graphics and all that, but it still felt very rigid, at least to me, per my RPG experience. But after playing through this, I think I have more of a appreciation for what was being presented in front of me for the remaster, and I think I'll be a little warmer to be able to take that in. So that is definitely something down the line.
Cool. All right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, as for me, I really enjoyed these games as a kid. Like, even though as a kid, so it was a blast to go back and play them again. Like I said before, the Super Famicom version of this game is a nice upgrade. That if you're just starting out, is a perfectly good way to play. If you don't care, this really is not any different from the Famicom versions, which I said before. The first two were released in North America, at least. So. Nowadays, I think this series, nowadays these games, like Joe said, are going to be very hard to approach by new gamers. If you are somebody who enjoys old school CRPGs, and for some reason have never played a Wizardry game, this the Super Famicom the collection is a great place to start, for sure. Because I think this probably is. Like I said before, this is the premier way to play those games now these days. The original ones, at least. Obviously, we were talking about the remake of the first game on Steam. But as far as the original games, I think this version is the best way to play them. So, your mileage will vary. So, if you enjoy old school games and have the patience for it, then by all means, you check it out. Otherwise, I don't blame you for playing a later game in the franchise, at least.
Yeah, and from what I saw on message boards, and GameFAQs, because GameFAQs is where you're going to want to go to be able to get maps to figure out how to kind of get through this. This game is actually, and it's funny to say, but this is the consensus that I saw. Through many posters, apparently this is the best way to play this trilogy. Apparently the Saturn and PlayStation ports are not that good and somehow nerfed some of the battle damage that certain characters can do, where this one was apparently more faithful to the originals. So when literally going through a 100-page forum, and out of 50 of those pages, you're seeing everyone say, play the Super Nintendo one, don't bother with the PlayStation or Saturn one, despite the graphical difference, because the graphical difference is there. The 32-bit upgrade makes it look pretty, but if everyone's saying gameplay-wise, this is the way to go.
I'm sure the load time doesn't help.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can't do anything but suggest this game. This is one of those, I can only imagine this is probably relatively affordable. I'm sure we'll get to that, but my guess would be, if you want just the Famicom game and, imported from Japan, I'm thinking maybe 30, maybe $40. Okay, maybe not.
Oh, you sweet little child.
I'm sure there's repro carts that you can get for probably about $60, maybe. But yeah, you're actually
way off on both counts.
Okay,
so.
Okay.
We'll get into it here. Then, like you brought it up.
I did see Saturn and PlayStation versions of this going for about $70, give or take.
Yeah.
So this being the preferred way, I did expect it to be a little bit higher, but yeah, I was trying to kind of.
You hit the reasons. You hit the reasons before as to why this is so expensive.
Yeah.
1999 release for the Super Famicom.
Yep.
That was niche release. So, I found almost nothing for this game on eBay.
Wow.
I found a single copy of this game, complete at least. From a North American seller who has listed who was listed for sale for $500. So, if you want the original game, you better be prepared to pay out a pretty penny for it. There are repos. There are repos of this game available for sale with the English translation already applied. From other American sellers, and available. They're selling the repo for $20, which is a very affordable price.
Yeah.
So, unless you care, the repo is the way to go for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Because,
or just play the ROM.
Yeah, exactly right. So, you're probably going to be playing this game on a clone system anyway. Like what's popular clone system? I can't think of anything like right now. But anyway, those clone systems have save states ability as well too. So it's like, either way, that's the way to go.
Yep.
I figured this game would be expensive. But it must have been a very small release in Japan, for sure. So, I mean, and this was not even the last, and this was not even the last Super Famicom release to come out in Japan.
Yeah.
I think we said before in past podcasts, the last Super Famicom game came out like 2002 or something like that.
Yeah.
So, it was ridiculous how long the system got supported for in Japan. But, I was just surprised as you were, Joe, to see how late of a release that this was.
Yeah.
So. But yeah, I mean, it's a good version of the game, though, for sure. For sure. I mean, not to knock the NES versions of the game. The NES versions of the game are very good as well, too. It's just that I think the improvements they made to the save system, the graphics, the music, and whatever this version of the game is worth it, if you care about that.
Yeah.
The NES version of the game is still very approachable as well, too, with the same challenges that you face that Joe and I just talked about. The fact that this is a 1981 game just simply dressed up. Nicer graphics, music and whatnot. But so the remake of the first game reviewed and sold pretty well. So maybe they might touch touch some other games too. So it's possible.
Yeah. Yep.
So did I at least? So hopefully, Joe at least got you curious enough to want to check out 5 and 6 later on down the road as well too. As I said before, those also got Super NES ports.
I mean, well, obviously being part of the podcast, I'll end up playing them. We'll see how it goes when we get there.
I played 5 for Super NES 2 when it came out, and so it's still Wizardry, of course, but definitely has like more modern quality of life improvements to it. And the game did, the game did sell very well too. For like when it came out, a lot of folks consider 5 or the 7th game considers the Dark Seven the best games of the franchise.
Yeah.
7, however, only got ported to PlayStation, Saturn, and some other like Japanese systems.
We'll have to put 5 on the preliminary list for next year, and I'll make sure that I go in fresh and don't play it beforehand.
As for 6, I'm pretty sure it's about I'm pretty sure there's an English translation available.
Oh, I'm sure there is.
So 5, 6 also is the first game. 6 also is the first game the franchise I think that does multiple endings. So that was also like a step up.
Okay.
From what the previous games of the series did. So, but anyway, we'll talk about those games like we actually cover them later on. So. This was fun. I was not aware of this collection even existing until recently, so I definitely want to, given my nostalgia for the series, I definitely want to check it out. So, so it definitely was, like fun to dip my toes back to a franchise I really haven't spent much time with in recent years, outside the recent remake, of course. But anyway, so. I think that pretty much wraps things up here for this one. So, did you have any last final thoughts you want to say, Joe, before you wrap it up here?
No. I think I've pretty much said all I can.
Okay, cool. All right. Alrighty then. As always, you can find us on Facebook, or you can also send me an email directly to the SNES Podcast@yahoo.com if you have any questions, comments, feedback, suggestions, or whatever. Joe, how can they reach you?
You can find me on Twitter at JOESUX30. I also have a very public and not family-friendly Facebook. I'll still mention the Radical Retro Roundup, although nothing has even moved on that. And I'm horrible. I haven't even contacted George about it. So it's honestly the first thing from my mind right now. And with everything else going on, it keeps getting pushed back. So it's on an extended hiatus, and we'll figure it out when I get around to it. But, the previous episodes are up, and I, always suggest, at least checking those out. So there's that.
Okay. Fair enough. So, alrighty. Well, as always, thank you very much, everybody, for giving us a few minutes of your day. And thank you as always for listening to the podcast. Next time we are going to be covering something that's a little bit easier to digest, I think. We actually had considered covering this game in our list of bad games from last year. It was last year we did that episode, right, Joe?
No, it was this year. What was it? This? Oh, maybe. Man,
I can't remember myself.
I think it was the start of this year. I think that's how we started the year, or maybe it was how we ended last year. But yeah. Anyways,
time is so wibbly wobbly on the
it was part of our Super Nintendo games that suck and don't need a episode on their own. But then we decided that it did.
Well, I decided pretty much it did because I actually have some affection for this game. So we're going to be covering the adventure game Lester the Unlikely, which is a very controversial for sure, interesting game. Some people hate it, some people love it. It definitely is a very polarizing game. I figured this game had enough meat to it that it deserved better than to be. Than to be consigned to that pile of garbage with everything else. So we may still hate it, but at least there was enough content there to make a full episode around it. But anyway, I only played a little bit of it. This is my first time actually digging into the game entirely from start to end to give it the full fair shake. So I'm pretty sure that this will be Joe's first time playing the game as well too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But
so.
Alrighty, so look forward to that next time. Yep. So, hope everybody out there stays safe, be well. We'll catch you again later on. Take care, all. Later.
Bye.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man.
Now you're playing with power. Deep power.